Hey, it's Drybear. Back again with another Diablo 4 build guide, and today I'm going to teach you how to level effectively and efficiently with your Barbarian. I'm going to give you two very optimized leveling builds that focus primarily on the 1 to 50 process and early Paragon. I'll give you a full build sheet that you can find linked down below in the description that you can follow along with, and I'll explain them so you understand exactly how to micromanage and master your Barbarian to level easily. But first, you should come hang out with me on my live stream. I'm live every single day on twitch.tv/Drybear, and we'll be covering the launch of Diablo 4. If you don't come hang out with me in the community, then the next time you open a bag of bread, you're going to lose the little plastic clip that keeps it closed. All right, let's talk about speed leveling your Barbarian and having the best time doing so. After having leveled all of the classes multiple times, doing multiple dozens and dozens of builds for all the classes, this is what I can tell you, at least what I've learned about leveling Barbarian. There are two builds down below in the description that I consider optimized builds for leveling specifically, that you'll have a very easy time clearing all the content on Torment 1 or Torment 2, depending on your preference. The two main vessels of damage that I would recommend for leveling with Barbarian are going to be Whirlwind and Hammer of the Ancients. There's other skills that work decently, but I think there's a lot of easy synergy that you can pick up from these that give you lots of benefit. When it comes to secondary skills, I think Warcry and the shouts, two of the shouts outside of Challenging Shout are very good. You can go with Leap for movement as well, and then for ultimates, you can go with any of the ultimates really. I think Wrath of the Berserker is probably better if you're gonna have any berserking build. Otherwise, you can use Call of the Ancients to summon minions. You're relatively tanky. You don't really have to worry about taking too much damage. Just make sure that you are upgrading your potions and upgrading your gear. If you're looking for a general leveling guide, I have a separate video going over all the things you need to be aware of to focus on optimizing your leveling experience, and I'll link that down below in the description as well, and you can find it on my channel. So let's go through the two leveling builds for Barbarian that you can find in the description, that if you can copy or use as a reference if you want, and we'll explain why they work so well for leveling specifically. The first one we'll go through is Whirlwind. I think Whirlwind is one of the quintessential Barbarian skills. It's one of the one that's most recognizable for Barbarians in general, and it's a ton of fun to just spin to win. It also happens to be one of the best leveling abilities because unless it's fully upgraded, you don't have crazy theory requirements to use it. You can apply bleeds with it. You can easily apply crits, vulnerability, and it can keep you moving rather than standing still, which is really nice. So let's go through the skill tree. Keep in mind that one of the downsides for Barbarian right now in the launch of D4, and we'll see how that grows over time, is that they have some of the lower build diversity. So there's going to be a lot of similarities between their builds. There's things that are just good and every Barbarian will pick up, and we'll talk about those as we go along. So just like my endgame builds, we'll start with the builder at the very top. I think one of the best leveling builders is Lunging Strike. This one moves you forwards, and you can chase enemies by holding it down. Makes it very easy to deal damage. You can also add to it a chance to grant you berserking or an extra bleed if you want. If you decide to run with some kind of bleeding build, you certainly can. But you want the way to heal yourself. This keeps you healthy, and it keeps you in range with enemies. It's one of the easiest and most casual ways to keep you managing your fury and just keep up with leveling. Then we'll come down and we'll pick up Whirlwind. For this one, I actually recommend using an axe or a sword in two-hand for the Furious Whirlwind. Sword is probably slightly better, especially once you have expertise activated, your class passive. Whirlwind also inflicts base damage as bleeding, and you can have plenty of effects that trigger off of this bleeding, but it actually does very respectable damage. This bleeding will stack up as long as you're spinning on the target. It works great in AoE, it works great in single target, and it makes the ability super good. You're going to be limited on skill points as you level, so be careful about what you put points into. My general advice is to go down and get your abilities first without putting any points into them, and then work your way back after you've gotten to the bottom, and then start picking up your passives. That way you can get some good scaling. But at the beginning, what you can do is you can put 2 points into Lunging Strike here. You can even put extra points until you unlock the next node. Once you do, put all your points into Whirlwind. So get like some extra value from that. Get Whirlwind all the way to 5 because it's your main damaging ability. And then you can also pick up Pressure Point about level 25 to 30 once you have some extra points, because this will give you damage amp from vulnerability and some other procs as well, which is really nice. Later on, I would get imposing presence probably towards level 50, want your last few points, as you'll need it for other things. And then the quintessential, like the requirement for all barbarian builds, because it just is the way that it is rallying cry. Almost every barbarian build on the planet will use this ability. It's just that good, it's hard to ignore, and it's even better for leveling. When you activate this, it gives you movement speed for 6 seconds and resource generation for 6 seconds, and it applies to teammates if you're in a group, which is really nice. You can also have it give you unstoppable, which means you can't be CC'd while you're running around, and you can make it give you Fury when you activate it with additional resource generation. So you can pop Rallying Cry and then use Lunging Strike to generate incredible amounts of Fury, spin, 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 do it all again, and you're good to go. Coming down to the next tab here, I would recommend running Leap with this build, because there's actually legendaries you can run once you unlock with the aspects that trigger off of Leap and Whirlwind damage. Plus, I think leveling with Leap feels a lot better because you can jump over mobs. If you get into a bad spot, you can jump out. It knocks back enemies and damages them. And you can also run with a Power Leap modifier, which makes it so that if you damage at least one enemy, you gain 40 Fury. So just leaping on the target and then activating Rallying Cry with doing nothing else will give you 60 Fury instantly. And every time you rotate through that, it makes it even easier and cleaner. And if you don't hit anyone with Leap, it lowers its cooldown, so you can use it for movement if you want as well. Anytime you're running at least one shout, Booming Voice is useful. Booming Voice scales up its value the more shouts you run. So if you really wanted to, you could run Warcry, though I would usually only run Warcry while leveling if you're running with a Berserking build, because it's one of the easiest ways to apply Berserking to your character. The second leveling build I'll show you does have this on it for that reason, which is pretty useful. But in general, you do want to be able to get these as well. Picking up movement speed is great while leveling. One of the best things you can do for your build is to get a boots with like 10% movement speed on them. So the fact that Barbarian has access to 12% in their tree for free makes it a very easy choice while leveling. Coming down into weapon mastery, I would recommend getting into Death Blow as a chance to reset cooldown on killing an enemy, which you're doing a lot while leveling. You're clearing trash mobs all the time. It also has excellent damage and costs no Fury, which means it won't interfere with whatever core skill you're running, in this case, Whirlwind, so you'll be able to use this to your heart's content. On top of that, though, you can make it do double damage to bosses, and then you can either make it so that it gives you Fury or it gives you Berserking, depending on what build you're running. I would recommend for Whirlwind, you just get Fury. So again, you can jump on the target, pop your Warcry, and then Death Blow them, and now you have 80 Fury without having to do almost anything. You didn't even use a builder at all. You got almost a full Fury bar just by doing that, which makes the leveling experience pretty awesome. We are running a Bleed, which is really nice. Bleeding on the target makes them slow. This is a very easy proc. This also, since slow is inside the crowd control category, that means that you're actually going to be dealing bonus damage and triggers from dealing damage to targets that are crowd controlled. So anytime they're bleeding, you're going to slow them if they can be slowed outside of bosses, and then you'll get bonuses from that as well. Since we're using slashing and two-hand, I like picking up Pit Fighter as well as No Mercy. This is increased damage against slowed enemies. Hey, 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 hey. So we get 9% increased crit chance against them. And we also have dealing damage with a weapon mastery. Your Death Blow will make your next core skill, your Whirlwind, apply vulnerable. It actually works pretty well for the full duration of Whirlwind until you let go of it. And it's great for large AoEs, you get that damage amp. Coming down into the ultimate tree, we're gonna pick up Call of the Ancients, and then we're gonna modify it as well. This gives you attack speed, it gives you Fury. So one of the Ancients is here and hitting. While he's dealing damage, you will get Fury back from it, which means it maintains your Whirlwind for longer and longer. You can slow enemies, which gives you that crit chance amp that we talked about earlier. You have a chance to stun enemies as well, and it's free damage, and they absorb projectiles and protect you, which makes this whole build super awesome. Again, because we're using a slashing weapon, a two-handed weapon, we want heavy-handed, which is really nice, and Wallop is also decent as well. And I recommend for this build actually running Walking Arsenal. What's cool about this, if you didn't know about Barbarian, is you have these different weapons to choose from, right? You have a two-handed slashing weapon, a two-handed bludgeoning weapon, and then two dual-wield weapons. You won't gain the stats or legendary passives from the weapon if it's not currently in your hands. So you can freely swap between them, but you won't, it's not like you're getting free stat sticks. What's cool about this though, is if a weapon says that it can be used by multiple, right? So things like Frenzy, you have to have dual wield weapons. You can't change this. If it says requires any complete arsenal weapon, you can right click on the ability and force it to use a specific weapon. Say, I want you to use dual wield. I want you to use two-hand slashing. I want you to use two-hand bludgeoning. So what you can do is you can set lunging strike to be one-handed or your two-hand bludgeoning. You can set whirlwind to be your two-hand slashing. You can set your death blow to be two-hand bludgeoning. And then every time you use one of those abilities, it counts as a weapon swap because you've told it to do that, right? So then you can use walking arsenal, which is when you deal damage with bludgeoning. I recommend, by the way, just do two-hand bludgeoning with death blow, two-hand slashing with whirlwind, and then dual wield with lunging strike, just because lunging strike is just there for generation. That's all three types of weapons, and every time you use each one of those abilities, it will swap and give you a buff for 6 seconds. And then when you have all three, you get another buff for even more increased damage. It's super easy. This won't work if you don't force these to use. It might use whatever weapon you have in your hand. So if you don't force it to use specific weapons, you might get stuck. But just remember that you can hit the ability and modify it and say, hey, I want you to use this kind of weapon. And if you use all three, when you use your entire kit, you'll get the walking arsenal bonus. Next, let's talk legendaries. If you watched my general leveling guide, I recommend just getting all of your powers on like accessories. Your best power on amulet because it gets a 50% bonus, and then your other important powers on rings and gloves, and then movement on boots is all you really need for leveling. I would never recommend actually going to the occultist and imprinting powers, especially on weapons while you're leveling. You want to make sure that your actual armor and your weapons is the best available stats you can get. Especially your weapon, you want it to be the highest base damage with the best stats on it. It's usually going to be yellow, and you just want to get fat, high eye level yellows that give you the best amount of armor, stats, and base damage. So you don't really want to be imprinting on weapons or items you're going to be replacing regularly because you'll run out of gold. So once you unlock, all of these aspects here are very easy to get. You can get them early. I recommend just putting these in here. Get Dire Whirlwind for Whirlwind. It gives you crit chance, which is really nice. You can get crowd control, restoring fury. You can get fury when you shout. You can get movement speed, and you can also make it so that when you damage an enemy with leap or with whirlwind, it'll summon an ancient and they'll do the same skill you just did. Very easy. Everything else can be yellow. You can have the best items you can get and do that while leveling. Here are your 6 abilities. And then for technique, since we're focused on two-hand slashing on our whirlwind, I recommend two-hand sword. It applies more bleeding. You deal increased damage. You deal increased bleeding damage for 5 seconds after killing an enemy, which you probably won't get by the time you start unlocking Paragon, but that is it. That is the first leveling build, very straightforward. On to the second leveling build, which is going to be a Fortify, Overpower, Hammer of the Ancients build. Again, with Barbarian, you're going to have very similar build sets. You know, things like Rallying Cry are going to show up in every build, and you're going to have some variations there. But this one is an option if you don't want a Whirlwind, you don't want to spin to win. I think this is a viable leveling option. And Hammer of the Ancients is very easy to get online and fun to use as well. So starting from the top, we have the builder. Bash is a great one. You probably want to just use two-hand bludgeoning on this and two-hand bludgeoning on the hammer as well, and you'll get synergies that scale off of that. But we're going to do Bash. It's a great way to build up your Fury meter, and you can also get chance to stun, which a higher chance is there. The duration of the stun is longer if you have a two-handed weapon. Then we're going to make it so that if you damage a stunned enemy, you get Fortify, which helps your overpower. And then every time you crit 4 times with Bash, your next core ability or weapon master ability will overpower, and we can come down here for Hammer of the Ancients. Just like the Whirlwind build, I recommend just kind of getting the points you need to get to this tree, putting all your points into Hammer to make sure it scales up well. You can get more Fury for 5 seconds for each enemy damage, so when you do a big AoE Hammer of the Ancients, you'll get a bunch of Fury from it, and then you can do additional damage for each point of Fury you have. So with this, you're scaling up until you have Fortify, get maximum Fury, Hammer of the Ancients, bonk, and it'll just slaughter everything on screen, and you repeat the process. It's very easy. You can also do the one that gives you damage increase after overpowering, but until you get later on with more gear options, I don't think this is going to have more throughput than just scaling off of Fury that you have. Instead of picking up the vulnerability, because we're not going to be doing Hammer of the Ancients all that often, you can't actually proc it that much, I think it's much better to do Endless Fury here. Basic skills, like Bash, will generate 15% more Fury when using a two-handed weapon. So, again, you can run two-hand bludgeoning, high stun chance, high stun damage, high stun duration, and it gives you a chance to crit as well, and you can get more Fury generation from it by running with your two-handed hammer. Coming down here, you get the required ability, Rallying Cry. It gives you Fury when you activate it. It gives you Unstoppable. All of that's really cool. Coming back down to this tree, it's going to be quite similar, but this time around, we're going to be relying on Berserking. Berserking gives you a nice damage bonus, and there's some free things that we can pick up specifically for a Hammer of the Ancients build, which is much better than the last build we talked about. We grabbed the free movement speed because that's free, even with just one shout while leveling. I think it's fine to get shout duration and then pick it up so you get 3% of your max life every second for the 7.2 seconds or whatever that you have with Booming Voice on just your war cry, or your Rallying Cry. So Rallying Cry is going to heal you for a large amount of your HP every time you use it, plus give you Fury. We're going to pick up Leap. Great leveling ability. Awesome. If you wanted to with this build, you could run with Berserking as an option for Warcry. I like Leap for leveling in general, and I also like it when you're running Berserking because then you can go into the passives here. So you get damage reduction while Berserking, but mostly when a brawling skill damages at least one enemy, Leap does damage. You'll deal damage to them. You gain Berserking for 3 seconds. So every time you leap, you get a free Berserking for 3 seconds. You can also replace this with Warcry to get 4 seconds of Berserking when you activate Warcry, but just note that the base cooldown of Warcry is much larger than the base cooldown of Leap, which means that this is going to give you more value overall. Of course, we do the cooldown reduction and we do the Fury gain when you use Leap. Coming down to one of my favorite leveling abilities, Death Blow. Super easy, costs you no Fury. We already talked about this. And instead of this time going for Fury gain, I think you go for 3 seconds of Berserking. So when you want to Berserk, you can jump on the target, 3 seconds of Berserking, Death Blow, 3 seconds of Berserking. You have damage reduction and damage amp while you're Berserking. Very cool, very bonus. Because this is an overpower build while leveling, and it's a little bit tankier and easier to play, you can run with Thick Skin. This gives you, as you take damage, you gain Fortify, which will make your overpower hits better. Increase the damage reduction gained while fortified. And we even get damage reduction while Berserking as well, which makes us tankier. And we come down here, and because it's a Berserk build, a Berserking build, I think it fits perfectly to run Wrath of the Berserker. This gives you Berserking and Unstoppable, dealing direct damage, grants Berserking. So between Wrath of the Berserker, activating Death Blow, and damaging with Leap, you can maintain pretty easily high uptime on Berserking, even while leveling with no good gear or legendary passives at all. And then while you have Berserking active, you gain increased movement speed and Fury generation, means that you can get more Hammer of the Ancients out, and you can also make it so that every 50 Fury you spend gives you more damage and scaling as well. Down here, I don't think for key passive you'll get too much value out of Unconstrained, because you're just kind of casually activating Berserking. It's not an endgame build that's perfectly optimized. So for this, because you're doing big, fat Hammer of the Ancients with full Fury, I recommend running Unbridled Rage. This increases the Hammer of the Ancients damage by 135%, and makes it cost more Fury, which is fine because then you have activations for Hammer of the Ancients where for every 1%, for every point of Fury you have when you use it, you deal more damage. You can also get some other legendaries that scale that up as well. So that is the variant for Barb leveling Hammer of the Ancients. For gear, again, I recommend not trying to put any legendaries on your weapons. Just get the best yellow ones that you can with the best stats and weapon skilling that you can. For technique, I would do two-hand mace because we're using it for basically everything. I would even force the Death Blow to also be two-hand bludgeoning just because you get benefits from that, especially when we come down here and we get this stuff. Your skills using bludgeoning weapons deal increased damage if the enemy is stunned or vulnerable. We apply vulnerable. We also apply stun with bash, which is really nice. We can make it so that overpowers with two-handed weapons deal increased damage. And we can also make it so that skills using bludgeoning weapons have a chance to stun on top of the chance to stun we already have with bash. So we can just force all of our Death Blow, Hammer of the Ancients, and bash to all use two-handed bludgeoning. And then when we get the technique for two-handed mace, up to 10% chance to gain two Fury. When hitting an enemy, double the amount of Fury gained while Berserking. So while you're Berserking, you're getting free damage, you're getting free Fury back, you're getting a chance to stun. All of that's really good and great for leveling. Again, you want to put your best legendaries that you imprint or get dropped on your amulet and your rings, because those are the lowest stat contributions. You want to get good yellow gear that it has good value on it, and then same thing for your weapons. For boots, you can pick up Ghostwalker Aspect, again, for movement speed and Unstoppable. And in this case, instead of the Whirlwind legendary for the amulet, I would recommend picking up Aspect of Ancestral Force. This gives Hammer of the Ancients a pretty big area of effect. It ripples outward, and it deals damage to enemies in an area, which is awesome. This also helps with, by the way, this passive here you gain Fury for each enemy damaged by Hoda. That works for this. You get a bunch of Fury back. It's a much bigger area. You can clear mobs much easier. And this Ancestral Force Codex legendary, super easy to get. It's very early on. Limitless Rage is nice. So each point of Fury you generate while at maximum grants your core skill increased damage. So while you're building Fury with all your Fury generation, even if you're at max, you get more Fury on top of that. It makes your Hammer of the Ancients do more. And then Echoing Fury is also nice so that when you use your Rallying Cry, you get Fury generation per second for the full duration, which gives you even more Fury. Those are the two Barbarian leveling builds that I would use. Either one is fine. They both work great. It's very straightforward. It'll get you to level 50 and beyond in a very casual way, and it's super optimized. So I hope this video has been helpful. If you found value in the video, leave a like down below. Leave me a comment. It helps boost the video in the algorithm so more people see it. And come by my live stream if you have any questions or you just want to hang out. I'd be happy to chat. If you enjoyed yourself today, leave a like down below. You can support me and my work on Patreon and view Patreon exclusive content, link in the description. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I'll see you in the next one.